went to school for chemical engineering and hated it. I was miserable. I was like, I do not want my life to be earning 2% more of, of a bottom line for ExxonMobil or any store. And like one of the first things the guy does is he controls it, but he renounces ownership. He goes, oh, I'm passing it off to some sham director. And he goes, I don't have anything to do. I don't know. As a Matt Levine interview with Sam Bankman-Fried. He didn't call him a fraud outright, but he's like, hey, it seems like you're in the Ponzi business and business is good.
Whoa. And what did he say to that? It's amazing that things with this amount of money can get this far sideways before anyone knows what's going on.
This is the problem with offshore accounts and stuff.
Jamie's looking it up.
I thought I knew it off the top of my head, and now I don't want to say the wrong one. A16Z.
A16 to, like, if you're Alameda Research and you're funneling money through a personal investor, that I think is the problem. I used to play like a variant of League, so I know it's fun, but it's not like fun to the point. Look, this guy's whole thing was like, I'm this effective altruist. Is he on Twitter? I probably butchered his name, but he was actually originally sort of an ally of Sam. So he invested in FTX early on, put $100 million in, and
how does a guy like that not wind up getting indicted?
I ask myself that every day. There's so many.
Is it a matter of time, or is it he's
appreciate your transparency? Kind of kissing up a little bit, but I was just like, somebody has to ask him some real questions. So I had 2 prior little Twitter Space interactions with him, and he kept getting away with the fact that,
and probably overly confident.
Yeah, it's pretty clear he didn't see like the full scope of the situation, especially at first. It seemed like he thought, he was like saying FTX US is buying both, lying about it so that you can get all the good press of like caring about all these social issues while also not caring at all. Companies, so they have to report everything. So if you're offshore, you can kind of not do any of that. You can play fast and loose. And, for some people, they think that's better. They can offer, let's say, like 100x leverage. You do not get to that level and not know that things were wrong.
Well, reading her tweets about amphetamine use was pretty wild, too. The whole scene was wild.
Just kind of grifting here. And so, but you'd see him in nice cars. And so I was like, what am I looking at? And then as I'm doing my YouTube show, I'm like, I get fed a bunch.
Do something like that. Like, why would he publicly communicate?
This is why it's so interesting to me to look at fraud. Like, this is why it fascinates me, as well as I think it's an important thing. But even Western Union has been they've been getting kind of pinched a little bit. Like, hey, you guys got to stop allowing all of this. But in crypto, because there's no her and I believe Gary Wang were big executives. They're cooperating. They pled guilty. They're cooperating with the feds. I mean, they did this. Tom Brady backs him. Well, Tom Brady's got to have some guys who are looking into this. And then it's like, well, BlackRock backed him. Well, BlackRock definitely has some guys who looked into it. Right. It's Sequoia Capital. They said he was Friedberg, shady. This guy
allegedly shady.
Dan Friedberg. No, he's definitely shady. I'll say that.
What was his? I remember, but what was his
assets? You can check yourself. Like, I have $1 billion in USDC. Well, that's great. But it doesn't matter if I have $1 billion in crypto, Bitcoin, whatever, if I owe $2 billion.
Right.
That's of that token, then you sell it off, and then the price plummets. So you thought you had a bunch of money, but actually it's worth nothing. Like, there's all these new scams that have emerged as a result of people getting interested in this idea of an alternative. Hey, just make this problem go away. This is the CEO. Like, go blame it on somebody else. Go blame it on some, third party that got access to our website. Say it was like a glitch or something. And so that on sticks or something. Like, it was never – the problem was the foundation was wrong from the beginning. If you don't have enough deposits to cover withdrawals, you just don't have the money, right? You're this big mess right now, and we're waiting for regulators to figure it out. Finally, regulators have stepped on the scene, but right now it's just this kind of wild, wild west, shocking thing. And I think that shows, like, if you're running a shady empire, like, who's better than a shady lawyer to try to help you cover it up, right?
How did you get in?
Sam goes, oh, you won, like, our battle. And people were like, is it a battle when you lose billions of dollars of customers to expose? But like, I'm interested in the characters who perpetuate fraud because they're such interesting psychological case studies. Sam Bankman-Fried, you could probably write a whole book about. What are you saying in the terms of service that means that I can't sue you? You have all these terms of service that basically say none of what I'm saying is true. Like, they say they can get you rich in the sales pitch, and then
what is it's a crypto exchange, right? So how does that work?
So the first question is when you learn about crypto, very treatable kind of cancer, and she's fine. But at the time I watched her as she's like, gets this diagnosis, gets swept up with all these hucksters who are telling her that the way to treat thyroid cancer, caught. In my view, what he did was criminal. That's why I started. But it hasn't been prosecuted or anything like that. But he's on a leaked private call. Everyone can go listen to it yourself. It's just this everybody. I ask him, and he doesn't want to talk to me. So, but he's going on these Twitter spaces. So I was tracking when he'd go on a Twitter space, and I would contact the people ahead of time and said, hey, handle now is they're finding a bunch of campaign finance violations because he was trying to influence politics, U.S. politics. I mean, it's insane how deep, not actually like this incredible business that you thought it was, that you're going to get rich easily. So don't do that. Go do crypto. You got to get into crypto now. And then it became inefficient. Like, you have $1, I'll let you trade with $100, and that's going to be like one reason you come to my offshore exchange. I can offer you more leverage than the guys who are like, calling that a fraud early. I have a buddy of mine. He goes by Dirty Bubble Media on Twitter. He's like one of the Anon at Twitter accounts. He was calling it a fraud. Crypto keys all the time. I mean, it's kind of an interesting idea where you go, I'm going to get in before everyone else. But a lot, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's like people get away with it. It's just there's too many people doing it. And you'll catch some people, but ultimately a lot of people will just basically skate by, even though by all rights they should have been. And then he goes into the crypto space and he launches FTX.
He's very young, right? How old is he?
I think he is young. I'm not, maybe you can look that up, Jamie. 31. Kept making the videos, and ultimately they never did, but I start doing that, and after I cover get rich quick schemes for a while, they have to say what they have, where they're putting their money. They're subject to more regulation about like how they take care of customer deposits. One of the big things with FTX was they told people, hey, you put your money with us, we're not going to touch it, we're not going to move it. That's the issue was. FTX's problem was not CZ. Ultimately, he's kind of the guy who like pushed over the house made of was going on. Now he's still like trying to say he did nothing wrong. He maintains he's innocent. And right now, actually, the big like kind of scam executives, Ryan Salami or something, I think that's his last name. Salami, I don't know, I just don't know how to pronounce it. But he was like, the number 3 donor to the Republican Party. But it was all orchestrated through Sam. But FTX was sort of the worst offender. Is let's say I give you a loan, Joe. So an unsecured loan would be I give you $1 million and I don't ask for anything. Okay, so this is funny. They found his League of Legends account, and during some of the calls after it was a fraud, you could hear him clicking in the background. Click, 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 click. He's playing League, located out in the Bahamas, which is a great place to put your.
Why do they do it in the Bahamas?
Because it's unregulated. So the problem with doing stuff in the United States, you can watch them. These are real people, Joe. You can be just like them. And so I started watching this and I started like seeing it. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so interesting. That's right. But
also to the Republicans.
This is what's wild. So Sam knew publicly in our current American climate, like
down, because it seems like they received additional scrutiny, right? Because now people are starting to look at it, and I saw that their value went down considerably.
The fact that this guy, he got away with lying so long and perpetuating this image of himself as this generous billionaire, he's sort of the next Warren Buffett, that when everything goes wrong,
finance hasn't had similar problems.
No, they've had a few runs, and they've covered withdrawals. I mean, so it's just the problem is a lot of it's a black box. It's a strange time, man, to be covering crypto, because I tried to tell people for years that this scam problem, this fraud problem, now if you're some criminal, laundering money has just never been easier. instead of taking $100,000 across the border or wiring it where it can get held up by a bank.
Figured it out, and someone would have started dumping their coin.
Yeah, people already, I mean, even leading up, like CZ gets a lot of the credit for it, but like already, like a day before.
Each other on amphetamines and making billions of dollars. Like, it sounds like a great story if it wasn't illegitimate.
Yeah, ultimately that's the problem. Like, Sam was just hopped up on amphetamines. And it's like, well, what's fungibility mean? It means whether you were a guy withdrawing who is this degenerate day trader.
Initially, he thought he was going to be able to figure out a way to pull all the company's assets together and
I think
make everybody sound and repay everyone, and gotten away with it.
So many of these scams are like these issues of either regulators not having time, not having the resources. So the person's not named in the report who is donating to Democrats. We know the one donating to Republicans was Ryan Salami. But that person eventually might be one of the first like trillionaires or whatever. Like he's such a great entrepreneur. They think he's such a genius. It might have been one of the A1Z guys or ARC, where it's like you can donate through super PACs, political action committees, and you can donate as much as you want. And you don't have to your name has to appear nowhere. And so that's actually, you can know their assets. So it's like a big thing recently in crypto. They'll say, hey, we're going to show you proof of reserves. What does that mean? They mean we'll show you on chain all our ultimately going to find out what we're doing here.
How many more of these are out there in the world?
As big as FTX, you have Dogecoin, you have SafeMoon, you have FTT, which is what FTX was using as their native token. So a lot of these guys, you'll start a crypto exchange. It's this guy who drives a Toyota. So you go like, well, why does he need to scam me if he's driving a Toyota, right? Then it's like, which Sam Bankman-Fried did. Then it's like, okay, 5 minutes or 3 minutes. So I don't want to give off the idea that like there's nothing here. But the problem is that with the A1Z, A16Z, it was one of those, Sequoia or A16Z. One of them wrote this glowing review of Sam, basically saying he's going to be one of the first trillionaires. So all these, like the house always wins, right? So when FTX was taking off, it just seemed like everyone who was someone was backing him. So then it was okay. And then I think a lot of these people deferred lack of regulation and the ability to send peer-to-peer, which means like you and I can just send money to each other directly, no middleman. There's also a really huge opportunity for fraud, scams. FTX said in their terms of service. So one of the really big problems was they actually weren't doing that, but nobody knew because nobody had a look at their books. Like it was very opaque, outright, the proceeds of criminals. I mean, we know that these criminals do launder their money through a lot of these crypto exchanges, through mixers. It's just sort of Washington. And I think there was like a tweet from Sam saying like, oh, like I'll see you the next time you're in Washington or something like that. But like it was kind of a dig because he knows CZ can't go to Washington. Like he would be LGBTQ plus causes. And it was through a guy, and the guy was like, I feel a little uncomfortable with this. And they said, well, we don't have anyone trustworthy at FTX we can donate through. And so now it's trying to be sorted out by the guy who literally unraveled Enron. And he says, this lawyer goes, it's worse than Enron. And from the arms of one huckster to another. Like, it's just like, it's almost to something worse. They're a real. You think you have this backstop because on the books it's worth, X dollars. Let's say it's like worth $5 a coin. But what you're not realizing is the real risk is when FTX can't pay you back, they probably can't pay anyone back. It's wire transfer, and it's kind of expensive to do these. Like you pay all these fees for wire transfers. So the idea is like, okay, well, if you have crypto, those wire fees can go down. And instead of taking, maybe a day or something, it'll take like. So they were paying everybody to promote this FTX crypto exchange. And the idea is this is the next big thing, right? And this is where you're going to make money, or with just put a bunch of garlic cloves in the pot. I still remember our house like reeked. She would put 60 cloves of garlic in in a stew. Yeah, Elizabeth Warren wrote a letter to them. They're being looked at much more closely. I mean, ultimately, all of these things are so opaque in the sense that. it's kind of like, okay, it's a little bit chic to be donating to Democrats. You can do that without too much, negative press. But if I'm the number 3 donor to the Republican Party, that's going to be a bad look. Yeah, that these basically nerds in cryptography thought of, which is it's brilliant. I mean, it is brilliant because it is basically it's almost impossible to trace. I mean, so it's like things are good for now. Yeah,
you don't know.
That was the problem with the FTX. Like they had hidden all their numbers. Like Sam had. I'm blanking on the name right now. But
A1Z. What is that?
No. I'm sorry. I'm blanking on. It's this famous. I'm going to remember it right after I get out of here. It's one of the famous war systems where they could see you, Joe, deposit a Bitcoin on FTX. They could grab that Bitcoin and start trading with it immediately.
Whoa.
Even though they were never supposed to be able to. FTX's influence went from the Bahamas reaching into the United States while technically not really being regulated by the United States.
Yeah, they were the number 2 donor to the Democratic Party.
I just wasn't interested. I was like, that's not my life. So I always wanted to sort of, have a voice. And so I started a YouTube channel just doing random videos.
And then when you have them on, there's a lot of, I wasn't aware. I'm not sure. I'm not aware of that. I don't know. There was all this hemming and
I, too, am safe because Tom Brady's got his money there. So I just put my money there.
Is the lure is like how Bitcoin used to be worth very little, and then one time it was with the high of Bitcoin.
Sort of, this is a fraud because, no one knew. There's a bunch of backing. So I made a video at the time being like, this crypto CEO just describes a Ponzi scheme. I started hearing about these tokens, and they're like, hey, selling courses, like it's always the new grift. You always have to find, because people figure it out. Like they go like, oh, that actually doesn't work. Like, hey, drop shipping is not surgery. You can just treat it naturally. Just don't worry about, hey, don't listen to the doctors. Don't listen to your general practitioner. You can just treat it with like colloidal silver. There was already all this worry in the past. That summer, there had been a bunch of companies that collapsed, and people had never thought FTX. It was kind of the first time anyone thought FTX could maybe not have the money. It means playing League of Legends while on investor calls. Like at the time, that was seen as this charming, genius thing.
On calls.
You could hear even actually. Okay, that's what ultimately matters is how much do you have on deposits that you owe out. And so with Binance, we don't really know. The only one we have a little bit more of a look into is found out how to be successful. And if you invest with me, I'll save you time. You could do it yourself, Joe. You could do it, but it's going to take you 5 years. Get with me. And I'm going to shortcut your
and a lot of ums and ahs, and you just kept on him. It was amazing that he felt like he could.
I hate doctors so much, and it always seems to end up with a sales pitch. Like it never was like, hey, let me just give you this free thing. It was like always like there's a catch. Mm-hmm. So I didn't. Crypto is sometimes national currencies aren't a great idea, and you want an alternative. So, look at the Turkish lira. I have 2 employees, and both of them are overseas. Like, one of them's in London, one of them's in Ukraine. And so, for me, I have to pay them, and, I have to do the, investment funds. They invested in a bunch of NFT projects. Mark Andreessen, I think, is the guy who runs it. Change that money for some type of crypto token. There's a lot of different tokens out there. And
explain tokens, because I don't understand tokens. I know there's crypto and there's tokens. Like, what is the difference between the two?
To their other friends, they're all saying it's okay. Let me put money in. And it's just a huge case study that just because other people have really, everyone got to look at it all at once in one place. And people notice, like, wait a second. A lot of their assets are just their own tokens. Like they had a Serum token, which they control most of. You believe, it's kind of too good to be true, but the social proof is overwhelming, and it overwhelms your kind of like alarm bells. So the social proof is a combination of things. So first of all, it's like
regulators, when he was trying to impose regulations or encourage regulations, how could that have benefited him as opposed to Binance? Like what could they have possibly done to make it easy?
And why is so much of your balance sheet made up of your own tokens? It's a big question. So one of the things that FTX had done, and a lot of companies were doing it, attack that bill. And now that it was all a fraud, or the guy who basically pushed it was a fraud, now they're like trying to retool it. Reputable people like BlackRock, Sequoia Capital, they all invest in this guy. Kevin O'Leary famously promoted it for like $18 million.
They gave him $18 million to promote it?
He says, why not? Like, there were just no adults in that room, and like the few adults that there were like, you know, they had like a criminal lawyer. Well, anyway, I don't think he's actually been convicted of anything. I shouldn't say that. They had this guy, Dan
Shady.
Free. He'd be afraid of being indicted, or I don't really understand why he can't go, but he can't go to America. So Sam was meeting with regulators. CZ felt cut out, like he was basically going to get a bad deal. I mean, he was, you know, really well regarded in Wall Street. So when people invested with him, they knew the like returns were insane, but that is his background. And so I asked, you know, Sam, I was like, you know, what does it say if this is your chief regulatory officer? This guy, I lied my way into it. I can sort of lie my way out of it. And this is what he did. So prior to this, I'd interviewed him twice before, and I had kind of gotten hamstrung with like, you know, he's just so good at dodging stuff. He's basically screaming about, you know, all these scammers online. And unlike my previous work, which kind of had resonated, like it had gotten.
What was the first video?
I started as sort of like an interview show, nothing about scams. I had a channel before it.
Did you interview him before the scandal?
No, not before the scandal.
So it's like as it was going down.
As it was going down, he goes on all these Twitter spaces. He doesn't want to, he's doing interviews with that smart thing, which is something like this happens, you shut up. You don't say anything.
Right.
And then you point at your boss. I mean, that's basically what they did.
Oof.
Which they for sure did stuff wrong too. And ultimately, one of the ways, like even some of the candidates they donated to were through like a third employee we didn't even know about. And they were like donating through him for like all these stuff. You're just having to trust these shady offshore entities that they're telling the truth. Binance says they're fine. They show proof of reserves, but what are their liabilities?
Like what are the regulations in terms of like what you're allowed to do and donate, and how did he violate them?
So I think the big violation was you're not supposed to. Senator's office reached out to me. They're like, "What do you think about this?" And I was like, "I don't know, man. You guys have to. This is y'all's thing to figure out. Ultimately, y'all's and I'd go because it was like my friends like said, "Hey, we have to get somebody. You know, you want to go?" And I was like, "Sure, I'll go." I was like kind of fascinated, and you'd see these guys in success. 2 months, you're going to be making 5 figures a month. 10 months, maybe 6 figures a month. And I've done it for people before. That's the social proof. I've shown people how to do this. I start covering it, and then I start to get cease and desist letters. They don't like that. So they start to send me, they say, "Hey, you better shut up or we're going to sue you." And I was like, okay. I'm not going to stop making these videos. I just
involved in what you do.
It's a weird thing.
So when did you start your YouTube channel?
So I started it a few years ago, 2018, 2019. Money and go start trading with it. Unless, you know, obviously we have FDIC insurance, stuff like that. But like they didn't have that. They just take your money, go trade with it, and that's where the disaster started.
Wild. The fact that they were all living together and fucking each other in this giant penthouse, this $40 billion penthouse. The things, it's insane. It's really. I almost wish
with regulators, they were all trying to. Sam was working really closely with regulators to try to get regulations passed, and CZ felt like he was cut out. So that stirred up this like battle between them, and ultimately nobody knew what was going on behind the scenes. So even though they said like we're not going to touch your money, as soon as you deposited Bitcoin, I mean, I talked to some of the insiders at Alameda. They said they had this back door. The problem is when at the exact moment FTX can't pay you back is the exact moment that FTT becomes worthless. So you think you have all this collateral. So CZ says, "Hey, maybe they don't have the money. I don't know. Whatever. I'm just going to sell like $2 billion worth."
But he knew what he was doing.
Oh, for sure. He's a shark. Most of this $10 billion is just their own tokens. So CZ takes this opportunity to kind of spread some, you know, sort of information about that. He says, "Hey, we're actually don't invest. Like that's a bad idea."
People, were calling bullshit, though. Just like they were calling, there was a few people that were wary that were calling bullshit on Bernie Madoff, and there was a few.
So we were warning people, hey, this is probably insolvent, get your money out. But CZ ultimately was the big, like, he was the most notorious and, like, well-respected. His whole thing was he did this thing with Ultimate Bet. So he was one of the lawyers. So there's this poker site called Ultimate Bet. And he got caught in this scandal where they had enabled this thing called, actually, campaign finance laws I've heard are pretty weak. I forget the name of the law, but it was passed in like the early 2000s, 2010s maybe, where it actually became very easy to donate. If you're from this one, you're not okay. Or I might say, hey, like CZ has connections to China, like maybe that's a problem. Or CZ has connections to here, maybe that's a big deal. You're going to make some money. And so people invested in FTX thinking that this is going to be a safe platform. This kid is smarter than everyone else. He's pilfering FTX, the customer deposits, and was using it in Alameda Research, which was his trading firm, to try to make extra money, and he lost it.
And so this is all because it's on through crypto.
Ransomware, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, 100%, because before it was like, okay, you need to use like Western Union or sort of one of these like these places where you can kind of send money without too much scrutiny. He's one of the leaders at the NASDAQ. I mean, he was one of the go-to guys. And so you thought, well, I invest with Bernie, like I can't lose. It's like almost, betting on the house. Okay, so like, can you do this?
So someone had to be gay to do it? Like,
No, basically they were like, we need someone trustworthy we can trust to do this. So, hey, you're going to be the guy. Like,
views about what? Like you didn't start doing this. You started doing just like a normal interview show?
I was just doing a normal interview show with a few of my buddies, and myself. They kind of shut down. Myself and some other people were saying, like, we think they're insolvent because we had taken a look at their numbers and we said, there's no way they have the money for this. They don't have the token. You can take that money and you can send it to what's called a mixer,